everybody and a stable environment, we decided to change it to our free tier Artifactory instance, because this will make sure that you have a good experience, and also that you can use the Artifactory and all of the other products which are included there, pipelines and X-ray, after the workshop. And the Orbiterra instance that we wanted to use before is alive only a few days, and it's less stable. Okay, so hopefully everybody is able to sign in. Does anybody else have an echo in my voice? Or is the audio okay for everybody? Okay, good. Looks like it's not for everybody. Good, that's good. Okay, so yeah, please make sure that you are using the free tier and not Orbiterra. Again, sorry for the last minute change about this, but I think this will make everybody's experience much better. Okay, if you have just joined, I hope that you caught in the chat, I'm putting it again, the Artifactory free tier. Please sign up for it, and then we can start the training with you together. Okay, so let me actually formally welcome you. Karen, are you here as well? Do you want to say a few words? You probably can't because you are muted. Let me see if I can find you and if I can unmute you. Karen, can you talk? Can you hear me? Yeah, we can hear you. Hi. Thank you, Karen. So Karen, I am leaving your account unmuted, so you can just mute yourself, but then you should be able to unmute as well if you want to say anything in between. Just a sec. We are not hearing you anymore, Karen. Great, thanks. Fantastic, thank you. Okay, I will also record this session, so we will send out a recording to you that you can share with the meetup group. Okay, I am going to, so welcome formally as well from our side. We are super excited to be able to deliver this hands-on workshop to your group. I'm going to hand over to your trainer in just a minute. So just a few housekeeping. We have Bartel and Oren here from the JFrog team for your technical questions. They will be able to advise in the chat. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat and they will be able to help you. You are all muted. If you need anything, please always use the chat. And yeah, as I said, we will record the session and share it with you. And of course, at the end of the session, you will be able to claim your free t-shirt that we promised you. So I hope everybody is ready to go. So let me see in the chat about the questions. Oren and Patel, can you maybe have a look if there are things that you can answer about server name or anything else that people might need? After login, it prompted to create repositories. That will be something that we will do together in the training. Okay, so I hope everybody is ready. Tal will introduce himself as well, so you get a couple of more minutes to get ready. And I hope you enjoy this training. And Tal, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Thanks. And guys, welcome to the hands-on lab, the artifact management with JFrog Artifactory. Welcome. I will start by saying generals and logistics. So I hope all of you onboarded with our free tier. It's like Catherine said, you don't need to configure and start. I saw in the chat some questions about creating repositories. You just need to register, put your basic information, then it basically loads between 5 to 7 minutes, and you'll receive an email with the URL and login information, and that's it. This is the place where you can basically stop and listen and be with me during the hands-on lab. This will be 1.5-hour session. I want to cover many topics, and I have a lot planned for today. If you have any questions, we have Batel and Oren, which are available for your technical questions on the Q&A. Ask any question you like, and of course, if we do not cover some of the questions, we will answer everything offline after the session anyways, so no worries, everything will be answered. Okay? So I'll start by introducing myself. So my name is Tal. I joined JFrog this year, actually, as a solution engineer in the DevOps acceleration team. On my job as a solution engineer, I assist customers in the DevOps journey with JFrog. I basically started my career working in a fintech company, which actually migrated to JFrog, where I was first introduced to JFrog solutions. I assisted on migrating a legacy CI project from Sonatype Nexus to Artifactory, where I fell in love with the solution, and I really had fun. So I decided to come to JFrog, and I was actually very curious about the liquid software company, about JFrog's vision, and my curiosity brought me to this place. I live in Tel Aviv. I actually studied in Ben Gurion in the Negev in Israel, computer science, and now I'm working on my MSc. So today's agenda, we're going to discuss about binary management, what it is, what Artifactory is, and its advantages. We're talking about the way of integrating your CI, your build to Artifactory. We're going to cover metadata on Artifactory and all our automation tools that are available. We will discuss security and permissions in Artifactory. And we'll provide a full overview about the whole JFrog platform. JFrog basically offers a DevOps end-to-end platform. But this basically hands-on lab is covering Artifactory. But we'll basically see the whole platform on our hands lab. At the end, we'll do some recap, summary, and don't forget your t-shirts. Okay, so binary and repository management. So from code to release. So if I'm looking at the basic flow, eventually you have a developer who's writing the code. He can declare new dependencies. With that dependencies, which are mainly can be brought from the internet. If it's a Docker app, if that developer is building a Docker image, if he writes a project in Java, then maybe he's using Maven, maybe he's using Gradle. In some way, he's building the project. Maybe he wants to run unit testing or integration tests, or he can scan the code for with a static code analysis tool, or he can scan for vulnerabilities. But basically, he builds a binary, an artifact or a package, and this binary later on is being deployed to the production environment or distributed to the production environment, where later on this comes to the customer, to the end user customer, who then enjoys the new version of the developer. So I don't see here a binary management, right? So where is the binary management solution comes to play in this playground? So basically, we need to understand how is it actually functioning at the moment, and what happens with JFrog Artifactory. So when you have multiple developers, multiple customers who are going to the internet to bring the dependencies they need to build the project, they are going to public remote repositories I mentioned. Okay, so it's Docker Hub, JCentral, npm.js for npm packages, etc. But what happens if they are not available? Okay, and what happens if you do not have access to the internet? What happens if you have a LAN network and you want to keep it inside the organization? So who eventually is managing these binaries? Okay, when you speak about managing the binaries, you need to have binary management, which is exactly Artifactory. And you can see in this diagram that the developers and the customers looking to fetch dependencies are no longer going to the public remote repositories. They are going to Artifactory, which basically brings these dependencies for them from the internet, but not only brings the dependencies, but also cache them inside Artifactory. So eventually, if these public remote repositories are down, you have Artifactory to serve and answer anything that you need to build the project. Okay, imagine a scenario where you need to build a project, but Maven is down, npm.js is down, Docker Hub is down. You can't build your project, you cannot release your version, and basically the customer impact can cause damage to the business. So Artifactory is a universal binary repository manager. Okay, it's one place, one single source of truth in the organization to go to store all binaries and their dependencies. You use Artifactory to proxy, to save inside Artifactory using remote repositories all the binaries that you need to build the project. And not only the developers are using Artifactory, but also the CI manager will work against it. And we will see that during the demo. So why use Artifactory? Because it integrates with more than 27 package managers, okay, and also CI servers. And when I say more than 27 package managers, it means that imagine every technology that you want to bring to the organization, you will have support in that in Artifactory. If you are using Helm charts, Docker, Maven, Gradle, Debian, or Python, you will be able to proxy and manage these binaries inside Artifactory. But also CI tools, okay? You're using Jenkins to build your CI processes. You have TeamCity. You use GitHub Actions. Name the CI server. We will provide an integration, and I'll elaborate on that more during the hands-on lab. With Artifactory, you will be able to have a system of record. It means you will have full metadata for all binaries in Artifactory. You will have the name, version, description, created date, updated date, etc. Artifactory is a checksum-based storage. It means that for every binary that is deployed to Artifactory, a checksum is calculated. And if you try to deploy the same binary twice or three times or more, it will only be saved once in the physical storage. Okay, so the binaries are basically kept in an optimized way. So you can, if you are storing Artifactory or installing Artifactory in the cloud, you know that the storage is optimized. You won't pay money on storage that is kept more than once. Automation. So a good DevOps solution needs to have great automation tools, and Artifactory has a fully documented and supported REST API. Everything you can do with the UI, you can do with the REST API. We have a command line interface called the JFrog CLI, which will be able to have a user-friendly communication with Artifactory. We will see that on our hands-on as well. Artifactory query language is basically allowing you to query your relevant binaries in a very specific way. So you will receive only the binary that is needed, maybe for the QA team, maybe for the production team responsible to bring the binaries to the production environment. And we also have a tool named Artifactory User Plugins, which are allowing users to insert their own logic into the Artifactory server side for their specific use case. Integrations. So in JFrog, we have dedicated teams who are responsible on JFrog being too integrated to fail. Okay, so we have many tools, and I will cover one tool in this hands-on lab for automating and integrating your CI and CD to the JFrog platform. So let's look at this DevOps flow and understand where exactly is Artifactory standing in this diagram. So first, we have the developer, okay? And let's say the developer is declaring new dependencies, is working on a new project, maybe he's writing in a Go application and he just declares the relevant packages that he wants to use, okay? First thing he does, he builds the project, right? And to build the project, he wants to resolve the relevant dependencies. He will resolve that dependencies while he's working on his laptop from Artifactory. So Artifactory will then bring, using Go, the relevant binaries, will save them into Artifactory and bring them for the developer to build his own Go project locally. After the developer is done, and basically, and by the way, Artifactory is also approaching using remote repositories that are configured there before that to bring the relevant binaries to Artifactory and then to the developer back. If the developer is done, he is ready to commit the changes into the version control system, right? So once it is deployed to the version control system, you have the CI server who are basically triggering a new build. But we said this build is also connected to Artifactory. So the CI server is basically also resolving the same dependencies from Artifactory. After the project was built, you deploy the modules to Artifactory with the relevant information from the build. And later on, while they are saved to Artifactory, you can have contribute any metadata that might be relevant to these binaries, okay? Maybe the QA team ran some manual tests. Maybe there are integration tests that are running, and basically anything that can provide more information about these binaries, if whether or not they are ready to go to the production environment. This step is where you can contribute metadata to the binaries in Artifactory. After this, and while the binary is ready, you can basically, if needed, bring it closer to the production environment using distribution. And when it is close to the production environment, you can implement your CD and basically bring it to the production servers where the customers are basically experiencing the new version, the new solution. That's it. This is the DevOps flow. So you can understand that Artifactory, as we see it, is one single source of truth. It is the mission critical heart here in this platform. And it is the binary management that holds the binaries and manages this solution with the DevOps flow. So when we say Artifactory is storing the binaries, where are they stored exactly? So binaries are stored in repositories, and we are speaking about 3 different repository types. First one is the basic one, the local repositories, which are used to physically store the binaries that are built on the CI, on the developer side. Okay, so for example, I have a Docker image, I build a new Docker image, I need to store this Docker image somewhere. I will probably store it in the local repository. I have a Maven project, I built a new application, it is running as a jar. I will store this jar on a local repository. So this is a local repository. Remote repositories, we talked about them before. They are used to proxy and basically they are served as some lazy cache for bringing you the relevant dependencies from the outside world. So for example, we talked about building a Docker image, and in terms of Docker, a remote repository might be pointing to a Docker app, okay? So when you build your Docker image, you will communicate with a remote repository that will serve as a lazy cache, okay? It checks if it has the binaries already stored in Artifactory, and if they are not there, it will bring them for you, okay? So it's lazy. It only brings them when they are needed. A virtual repository is something that we consider as best practice because it basically allows you to aggregate multiple repositories under one URL. okay? When you build a project, you need two endpoints. You need one endpoint to bring the relevant dependencies, and second endpoint to store the binaries, okay? But you do not want to communicate with two different endpoints. It's much easier to communicate with one endpoint. This is why we have virtual repositories. And I will show that on the hands-on lab as well. Before we continue to the hands-on, I will just mention, and I think on the free tier, when you basically, and I will show that, basically when you log in, you are able to choose which repositories do you want to be created in the platform. And while you do that, you will see some naming conventions, and this is the naming convention that we recommend to use for repositories. First, there is the name of the team that is responsible to deploy to this binary, to this repository, the name of the technology, which can be Maven, Docker, Helm, etc. The maturity level of the binaries, which can be production, QA, etc. And if this is locally or remotely, as this is the locator. Okay, demo time. So let's jump into our environment, and I'm clicking here. So this is the whole JFrog platform, which basically on the left side, you can see all JFrog products. I will cover the whole platform in an overview on the end of this session. But in general, I want you to, and I'm sure when you onboarded on the free tier, you've probably seen this screen that basically on the first attempt of logging into Artifactory, you can create the repositories automatically by choosing the technology that is relevant for you. So here you can see, for example, that some technologies are already have repositories that I created. But if, for example, I'm choosing Cocoa Pods and Conda, and I click on Create, and I recommend you to do that as well if you are on the free tier right now, so you will have a few repositories to play with. You will see that these default repositories were created for me, and I can basically start clicking Finish. I will see them under the Artifactory tab here, and I will be able to start and use these repositories and deploy to them eventually. Okay, so please, if you are on Artifactory right now, click on the quick setup and make sure these repositories are created, and so we can basically go and deploy, and you can understand the examples with me. For the hands-on, I really recommend to choose Maven because I will pick a Maven example. So please choose Maven, and also a generic repository. So this will be can be used during the hands-on lab. Okay. So so this is Artifactory. Okay. Basically, once you click on the this tab, we have three different tabs: one for packages, one for builds, and one for artifacts. The packages show us basically the different applications that are deployed into Artifactory. And if, for example, I'm searching for a specific package, this Docker app, for example, while I'm clicking on it, I'm seeing the relevant versions that were deployed to Artifactory. Okay, so if I'm clicking on one specific version, I can see the package view, and we discussed about metadata, and this is where metadata takes place. On every Docker image, I can see the different layers, okay, and what command represents them. So this is one example. Let's take maybe an other package just to show the difference. And maybe I will search for a Java example. As you can see here, under the packages, I can search in a smart way, and I can choose which type of packages I want to look for. If I'm clicking on Maven, then I will see all the Maven packages. And if I'm clicking, for example, on this Angular.js and on this specific version, basically, I can go and see on which repositories it was deployed. And going back, this is more of a high-level view that can explain you how many versions do you have for this package and how many times it was downloaded from Artifactory. I'm switching to the artifacts view, where you can basically see all repositories that are existing in Artifactory. Okay, so if I'm choosing here to have no filters, I can scroll and see all the relevant repositories in Artifactory. Okay, I can choose some repository here, and maybe let's choose this NuGet package, and we can see all the metadata regarding this NuGet package. On the general, you can see the name, the repository path, where is it exactly existing in Artifactory, who is the deployer, what is the size, when it was created, and also we said it says checksum-based storage, so you can see the relevant checksum that was calculated for this NuGet package. And the same way for Docker, you can see that this npm package has its own tab with the NuGet package info, and you can see all the metadata here as well. Okay. The third tab is for the builds. And in Artifactory, we have a feature named build integration. Build integration is something that I will elaborate on that on the next slide. But eventually, you will see the information from the build side inside Artifactory. Okay, so every CI process that you have will also exist here in case you deploy the build information, and this can be super useful. Okay. Also, if you are an administrator, you will have an administration panel. And on this administration panel, you will be able to manage the Artifactory solution. And as you can see here, if I'm going to the repositories, I'm able to see the local, remote, and virtual repositories that I configured. Under the local repositories, I can basically click and see that this local repository is of type Maven. And I can play with the configurations. Maybe black out this repository so it wouldn't be able to use it, and maybe we'll see remote repository, for example. We discussed about Docker, so as you can see, this is a Docker remote repository who is in this case pointing to Docker app. Okay, so I can use this remote repository to build my Docker images, and this is a remote repositories. Last one is the virtual ones, which are aggregating multiple repositories under one repository key, under one URL. And if we're looking at this Docker repository, for example, you can see that all 5 different repositories, some of them are all 4 are locals, and the last one is remote, are existing in this virtual repository. So a question raises, basically, so if you have, and I'm, for example, approaching and using this virtual repository, and I'm deploying my Docker image, which repository will hold this image? I have 4 different local repositories. So that's why we have a default deployment repository. So when you set a virtual repository, you need to choose the one local repository that the binary will be deployed to, okay? And the way it actually works is when you have multiple repositories under one virtual repository, okay, we have what we call Artifactory resolution. We have the order of resolution. And it means that it will first try to search for the binary in the local repositories, okay? Then, if they are not existing in the local repositories, it will go and search on the local cache. And if they are not existing on the local cache, only then it will go to the remote repository, trying to bring them from the outside. Okay, so this is the way to basically use virtual repositories. And maybe I will go and show you an example. And let's go back to the artifacts. And I want to see basically the libs release. Okay, so all of you, when you set up with this quick setup, when you create the repositories automatically from Maven, what you have is automatically created the virtual repository named libs release, which is pointing to 2 repositories. One is libs release local, and the other one is JCenter, who are connected to Maven Central to bring the dependencies that you need. So communicating with this libs release can be, we can take as an example this binary, okay? So this job was deployed into Artifactory, and if I have this URL to this file, I can copy this URL, and once I'm going, and please have a try, and you can do that when you basically click on deploy. Choose some random file, okay, from your computer, and deploy it to Artifactory. Okay, once you deploy it to Artifactory, you basically need to click on deploy. It will later on exist on that repository, and copy the URL of this specific file. Once you copy it, please add a question mark with trace And this will help us understand the way virtual repositories work, because what I receive here is the trace log of how Artifactory works behind the scene. So basically, you can see that all the different logs and where is Artifactory basically searching for this binary. Okay, so we can see that it was unable to found on libs release local. Okay, and it is searching for this binary in JCenter cache, and it was unable to find it on the cache as well. Okay, like we said, it's going to the local repository, then to the cache, and if it's not in the cache, it should bring it from the outside world. And actually, yeah, it's using this remote request URL to bring it from JCentral, and this is a great example of Artifactory resolution in this virtual repository use case. Okay. By the way, what happens if I'm basically clicking on it on the second time? This is already existing, and as you can see here, it's bringing it from the local cache, and it does not need to go to JCentral one more time. Okay, great.
Hi. This is Katrin speaking. Sorry to interrupt you. I think
Sure.
we need a little moment. I think it's going very fast for people, and I think we still have a few people who are trying to catch up with their sign-in. So maybe we can pause for just a couple of minutes
Sure.
so that everybody can follow accordingly.
Sure.
So if anyone has any questions or something that we can help you with to catch up, please let us know. We will pause for 4 or 5 minutes, and hopefully you can catch up.
Okay. Great, guys. If you have any question or something you want me to elaborate to, feel free to write on the chat, and we have enough time to make everyone aligned to what I'm saying. Well, if you have issues creating the Maven, then it might be already existed on the as a repository. Okay, you might already have a Maven repository, so you will not have the ability to set it up with the quick wizard. So please maybe verify that this repository already exists and you can deploy to it. Okay.
So maybe if you could at the moment just place your questions here that would help you for catching up, and for the rest of the technical questions around our tools, we can take it later so that we are able to continue the training.
Yeah, Catherine, can I add one more thing, please? So everyone that's having any issues with the server name or anything that's related to activation of the servers, please send me the server name too, or a link for the server.
Okay, thanks, Batel. Also, there was a question for a lab or a demo purpose. It is okay to set up one local repository like Maven, or we need to set up one virtual repo as well. So I recommend to use the quick setup, because then you will have, if you choose Maven, you will automatically have local repository, remote repository, and the virtual repository. So for the demo and hands-on purposes, it will be easier to do it with a quick setup. And yeah, and I'm showing the example on a virtual repository.
So somebody is asking about the Artifactory menu. So the quick setup is on the right top icon where it says welcome and your name. There's the quick setup.
Yeah, also there was a question about the difference between local and virtual repository. So I'm just mentioning again, local repositories are used to store the binaries. Virtual repositories are just pointing at other repositories so that you will eventually have one repository to communicate with, okay? So virtual repositories are just pointers to other repositories that you will need to use.
Batel or Oren, can somebody maybe go through the questions in the Q&A part, and not the chat, but there's also the Q&A part that where a couple of questions, maybe we can answer some of them live.
But Elle is on the Q&A and I'm on the chat.
Oh, okay, fantastic, thank you.
Great. Yeah, so guys, eventually what I want you to have is one virtual repository named libs release, okay, which can be created from the administration panel under repositories. You can basically, if you are not succeeded with a quick setup, you can basically create one virtual repository, okay, named libs release. Okay, this one is pointing at two different repositories. The first one is libs release local. The second one is JCenter. JCenter is a remote repository pointing to this URL. Okay, so it's only this configuration. And libs release local is just a local Maven repository. Okay. Yes, I will go over some open questions as well. So what repository I must choose if I'm using Go? So you have a Go option with the quick setup. On the quick setup, you basically have all package types that are supported. So yeah, so this one is the Go. And in this case, for example, I cannot create it because the default repositories were already configured, okay? Okay, great. I see that many people successfully created their servers. Yeah, well, there were two questions on the chat. So first one is why using JFrog Artifactory. Second is that if you have already the NPM package, why should you use JFrog? So I can go back and speak about that as well. So in general, Artifactory is basically a binary management solution that allows you to manage the binaries and keep them under one place. So you will be able to better monitor it. And in case something happens to the public remote repositories and they are not available, you will still have them cached and ready to go in Artifactory. So you will keep working and building your projects and delivering the latest versions for your customers. Also, with Artifactory, you have many automation tools that will allow you to have what JFrog sees as its vision, liquid software vision, where it means that all DevOps flows are working like and bringing the relevant updates like liquid without any human intervention. Yeah, so if you already created a virtual repository and you have, for example, this libs release, you can click on the deploy and manually choose to deploy a binary, okay, from your computer. Just you can choose some binary and test the deployment part. Yeah, and it's uploaded. So, Catherine, shall we continue?
Yeah, let's continue because we have a lot to cover. And if you have any, maybe you want to just, if you still have not managed to sign up, maybe you just want to watch the training and then the Artifactory instance that you signed up for doesn't expire. You can use it anytime you want to. And what you can do is you can just watch and learn, and you can try it out afterwards. And we will also share the recording of this training. So you can always go back to the recording and watch it again. But I think we can continue now, Tal.
Okay, thanks a lot. So yeah, so I just deployed some binary to Artifactory with the UI. And so basically I can get now all the metadata for this specific file, and I can see the checksum that was calculated. I also, what also we have here after the repositories are being configured, the next step is to basically communicate with this virtual repository. If I'm a developer, or if for the CI process, you eventually want to use this virtual repository to build your project and deploy the binaries to this repository. So for the customers to have an easier integration, we have a button called Set Me Up. And the Set Me Up feature basically allows you to have the relevant configurations, so you will be able to communicate and integrate to this virtual repository in a very easy way. As you can see here, we support all the technologies. So if it's a NuGet, then we'll have the NuGet commands, so you will be able to deploy to this repository. And if it's Python, then in this case for PyPy, we provide you the commands to run and to be able to communicate with Artifactory. And yeah, and so now I'm focusing my example on this, and I want you to take some repository in GitHub, which are called Calculate. It's a tiny repository to run some experience in for CI/CD purposes. And basically, I want you to clone this project. I'm sending the project in the chat. So basically, what I'm doing right now, and I will clone this repository to my desktop. Sorry, it was already here. So I'm going into this repository, and as you can see, it has a folder named maths. And if I'm sitting into this folder, I can see basically that I have my POM file, my Jenkins file, and this is from the project itself. If I'm just building the project using Maven, what happens is that you can see that it's downloading the dependencies from Maven Central, right? So now I'm not using Artifactory, I'm dependent on Maven Central, and the project will be built from JCentral. So what happens if I want to try out and configure this project to work with Artifactory and bring the dependencies from Artifactory? So let's stop this and basically check the Set Me Up button. So I'm standing at this virtual repository and I'm clicking on Set Me Up. Okay. I'm sharing the link again, okay, here in the group. So yeah, so this is the link, just git clone this repository. So when I'm clicking on Set Me Up and I'm clicking on Generate Maven Settings, what you will receive here is a snippet, a settings.xml file that you have all necessary configurations to communicate with this virtual repository. So all you need to do basically is to download this snippet, okay, or to copy it. And once you download it, okay, you will see that the settings XML is actually this one, and you can use it to build the project. Okay, so what I did is I brought the settings file here before, and as you can see, all the links and the Artifactory URL is here with the virtual repository name and my credentials. Okay, so here I'm using my username, and this is the API key. When I'm basically using this file with settings.xml, what I will see here is that, just a second, when I run this command, it's starting to proxy and bring these dependencies from Artifactory and not from JCentral. Okay, so I did it very fast, very quickly. I didn't need to configure anything, just download the configuration from Artifactory right away. And Artifactory will now store the relevant dependencies in this virtual repository. Okay. So, okay, great. So if you are testing and basically downloading this snippet, an API key will be generated for you. But if you want to just see it in Artifactory, under your username, you can basically click on Edit Profile. And under the API key, you can create a new one, regenerate a new one, and copy this API key so that basically all the REST API commands can be used for these purposes. Okay, great. So I hope that some of you, yeah. So I see that there is someone who's have issues with the Git. So what you can do is basically download the code and not use the git clone command. Okay, and this is also an option. Okay, great. So let's move on. So we saw a way of basically, we covered the Artifactory overview, and the next phase is basically discussing metadata and automation tools. Okay, so Artifactory can hold metadata, as you can see. It has its own database, which is used to store the relevant information about the binaries. But you can also bring your own metadata to the binaries that are stored in Artifactory. Okay, you can choose your own key value pairs. And when I say key value pairs, this can be either the team leader name that is responsible to bring this binary, the maturity level of this binary, and this can be assigned to any binary that you need. Okay. When you use this Artifactory metadata, you can deploy the metadata of the binary with the UI, REST API, CLI, and more, and later on can search with this metadata. So yeah, so the full REST API and the CLI and Artifactory query language are all documented here. And I want to jump into the examples, and I will run this in a second. So running the curl command, you can receive information if Artifactory is available. This one does not require credentials, but once you start running any REST API commands, make sure you are using the username and password. The password can be the API key. And I will run the commands and show them in this way. The JFrog command line interface is a smart client with Artifactory. It has a simple interface to our products, and once you install it, you can basically communicate with Artifactory very easily. It has high-level functionality. It implements smart logic behind the scene for you. It is aware of checksum, so it wouldn't try to deploy a binary to Artifactory if it is already stored. And you can run it in a dry run in simulation mode to understand what is the impact before you actually run it. So the syntax is basically running JFrog, the target, the product target that is relevant, the relevant command, and multiple options. With the CLI, you can download files, copy files, move files, and delete files. I will show an example on the Artifactory query language, which is possibly helping you bringing only the relevant binaries that you need based on metadata, based on dates, etc. And you can use that with the REST API or CLI commands. Okay, so let's go into the examples, and I will go on the command line, and let's start. So basically, first command we will run is to check basically that our Artifactory server is answering our request and is available. Okay, so I'm copying this on the chat as well, so you will be able to run it and use it. Next command is basically getting the service ID from Artifactory. So every product server that is running has its own ID. So if I'm running this command, I receive this ID that is relevant for this server that is running. I'm copying this one to the chat as well. Second. So for the command to be successful, you will need to put your username, and you will need to put your API key and change the URL to fit your own URL that you were provided with from the free tier. What happens if you want to deploy binaries? Okay, so with this REST API call, basically what I'm doing is I'm deploying binaries to a repository named generic local. And this is the name of the file that I'm deploying. Before I'm running it, I'm just go back to my desktop where this file is existing. And let's see how it exactly works. Yeah, so it's running in the background, and now I'm supposed to see under the generic local repository a file named Kubernetes for everyone. So yeah, so if I'm going back, and so if I'm going back and I'm scrolling into the Artifactory, generic local. So for an easier way, I can just choose to look only for the generic repository types. And once I have them, and I can see that under generic local, I have the Kubernetes for everyone file, okay? Next one, and you will be able to I will post that on the chat as well. So you will be able to test it and make sure that it's actually working. Just a second. Great, so next command will be searching, okay? So let's look at this one, where I'm first using the AQL. So here, what I'm doing is I'm searching with the Artifactory REST API with an AQL query. So I'm sending a post request, and this is the AQL query. It's items.find, and what I'm doing here, I'm choosing to have a generic local repository, and this is supposed to bring me all binaries from this repository. So if I'm clicking here, I can see that I received the JSON response, and the response contains all the binaries in this repository. So you can imagine how convenient it can be if all the relevant binaries here are used to production or to QA. You can take this JSON further and extract the relevant information and use it for your own purposes. What happens if you want to create a user or delete a user? So let's try it with the UI and REST API. I can click on a new user and maybe create some dummy user, choose a dummy email address. and also choose a password. And let's create this user. Okay, it was successfully created. And now I'm trying to delete it with the REST API. And this is a scenario where basically, for example, if you're moving to a SAML SSO provider and you want to ignore and not have an internal users in Artifactory, then you can basically use this API to delete or get rid of your internal users, so that the only authenticator that might be relevant is your SAML SSO provider. So the name of the user was the dummy user. So right now I'm basically sending this, and it has removed successfully, which means that it should not exist here anymore. If I'm refreshing this page, let's see. Great. So under the users list, yeah, so dummy does not exist anymore. Okay. So yeah, so we have a fully REST API documented. So you can basically, like I did, choose some action that you can do with the UI. You can do it with the REST API as well. And this can be helpful while onboarding to new teams and do the same operations only once with the script that you write using the REST API. And this can be very easy. Let's move to the CLI. So using the CLI is basically with JFrog commands. And with that, you can basically see that this is the version. And what happens when you start using the JFrog CLI is you need to choose an Artifactory instance to work with. So to do that, you need to start running commands. The commands are starting with RT, which means Artifactory. And I can start by seeing what configurations do I have at the moment. So right now I can see that I have one server which I'm communicating with. This is the URL of the server, and it's under my user, and the password is not in here. What happens if you want to create a new user and configure it with your information? So in order to do that, you will need to basically first let's clear this configuration. So we start clean, and now I have no configurations to show. So what I'm doing if I want to create a new configuration is run JFrog RT C. Okay, so I need to choose the Artifactory server ID. Let's call it hands-on lab. Okay. And now what I'm required is to choose the Artifactory URL. So please make sure you are using this URL, okay, where the beginning is the URL of your Artifactory instance, and it should have /Artifactory at the end. So yeah, so this is the JFrog Artifactory URL. This one is optional, so I'm skipping it. The access token is something that we're not using. We want a username and an API key. The username that I'm choosing is *yi, and the password or the API key is the following. And let's ignore this one and ignore this one, and we're basically ready to go. So now under a configuration, I can see that this server ID was configured. And the first thing I want to do is basically ping this server to make sure that it's really available. And I can speak with it. And as you can see here, I received OK. It means that I can communicate and start running any commands I want with this Artifactory server. OK? So let's start. So basic command will be searching, right? What happens if you want to search inside Artifactory and find some relevant binaries? So let's use AQL for that. And we have an Artifactory search command using JFrog RTS. And basically in this command, what you need to do is to define your file spec. The file spec is, and let's copy it before we run it. Just a second. Yeah, so as you can see here, the file spec is a JSON that represents the AQL query. And this AQL query is basically finding you all binaries from repositories that are matching this regular expression. So let's run this command and see what we receive. And just a second. Great. So we received many results, and this is basically all binaries that are, as you can see, matching the regex that we defined. But maybe you want to limit the results or add more and look at only one result, so this is something that can be achieved using a limit. So maybe we want to limit the results to only 3 results or play with the configurations. So as you can see here, it's providing me only 3 binaries in this example. Other examples regarding the CLI is maybe showing you binaries, and I'm showing the other file spec here that are loaded after or created after 2017 or maybe before 2017. And this example is a great point for doing cleanups. Okay, so let's say you're using Artifactory for quite a while and you have some information that might be not relevant anymore. With AQL and with JFrog CLI, you can retrieve and look at the binaries that are maybe not relevant and delete them afterwards and automate this process. So if I'm running this command, I can basically receive all binaries that are loaded after 2017. And let's copy this one. And as you can see, there were 28 binaries, and this is my result. Okay. Okay. Let's move on to the CI integration part. So yeah, so we support multiple build tools. Okay, and if you need to build your Maven project, your Gradle project, your Docker application, and you want to do it from Jenkins, from Bamboo, from Circle CI, this is something that we are supporting. We have plugins and extensions, so you'll be able to have a very easy integration. If you have a missing functionality, you can, as you can see, you can use our REST API or CLI. And the CI server will basically download the dependencies, upload the package, and publish the build information from the CI level, and we will see that during the demo. When you publish your build information, and we call it build integration, you are able to see in Artifactory builds, the artifacts that were deployed, the modules within these builds, and all the dependencies that were used, okay? And we will see that during the demo. I will elaborate on that in a few seconds. So let's say you have your CI server, you created some binary, some package, and it was deployed to a repository in Artifactory. We have a concept named build promotion, which means that basically you are moving the binary from different repositories based on the maturity level of the binary. So if, for example, you have a binary that is deployed to integration repository, once it is deployed to integration repository, you can have quality gates to check this binary, okay? In this case, running integration tests. And only if the tests are valid and have no issues, you are promoting it from one repository to another, okay? In this case, these are all local repositories, and they are representing different maturity levels for these binaries. Okay, great. So let's go and see a demo. So in my example, I choose to have basically GitHub Actions. GitHub has released a CI solution named GitHub Actions, and I'm posting this on the chat, so you'll be able to scroll and.
Kai, when you are posting on the chat, please make sure that you select panelists and attendees, because otherwise not everybody can see it.
Sure. So yeah, so now it is all panelists and attendees.
Thank you.
Yeah, great. So we are looking at this Calculate with GitHub Actions project. So here in this example, I choose GitHub as the CI server, but this can be applied to either any CI server that you are using, if it's a Bamboo or SQL CI or other solutions. So under the Actions tab, you are able to see basically the relevant CI that is running. And in this example, what I want to show you is how I took a CI process and I integrated it with Artifactory. So in order to do that, let's start from fresh. Okay, I'm cloning this repository here. Okay, so I'm bringing this to my desktop. Okay, now I can cd to this repository, and while I'm seeing this repository, and this is actually the same as the last one with the mats folder. What I'm doing here, I want to basically check out to a new branch, or let's say hands-on lab by Tal. And when I'm checking to a new branch, I want to do some dummy commit and show you what happens, okay? So let's just push some space so that the CI will be triggered and push it to dummy commit. And let's push it to the version control. So yeah, so I need to push it with the branch name like Git is mentioning. And basically, yeah, great. It is deployed to the version control. And now what happens is that under the actions, I will see a new job that is running. And let's follow and catch up what happens here. And we will go over the code right after. Great, so the CI is starting to run. And what we can see here, we have two critical steps. One step is to set up the JFrog CLI, and another step is to ping this JFrog CLI. So if I'm going to GitHub Marketplace, okay, what I can see here is when I'm searching for JFrog, I'm able to see an action named setup JFrog CLI. And this action can basically help me install the JFrog CLI inside my CI process. And this is the way of integrating into JFrog Artifactory in this scenario. So all I need to do is just insert these two lines, and I receive all functionality of the JFrog CLI, and I can start building the project, deploy the project, configure anything that I need, and deploy it to Artifactory. So if I'm switching back, okay, so the setup JFrog CLI was the one used here to install the CLI, okay, and configure it with my Artifactory instance. The ping JFrog CLI step is to, like we saw, to make sure that where our Artifactory is available and we can basically access it. And after it is all set up, as you can see here, the build and deploy phases are starting to resolve dependencies from Artifactory, from the repository that was just created, named Virtual Hands-on Lab by Tal. Okay, so it's downloading dependencies from Artifactory, and it will eventually deploy the binary into Artifactory. I will go over the code and show it, and we'll let this process run. But eventually, it is a YAML-based CI process. And as you can see here, the two critical steps were setting up the JFrog CLI and pinging it. And after that, building the project is very easy. Okay, all I need to do is cd for the relevant folder project, and with the CLI, build the project using Maven. Okay, so this is just one example, but this can be done basically from every place, every process that the CLI is installed there before that, and you can use that to integrate with your CI processes. Of course, on some cases and on some CI processes like Jenkins or Bamboo, we have extensions, we have plugins, and the integration might be looking a little bit different. But this is a very general approach, and maybe we will see that the process is ended and watch the file in Artifactory. So let's go back to the actions. I can see it's running successfully, and eventually the build and deploy phases deploy the binary into Artifactory. If I'm scrolling down, I can see that the build was successfully, and this is the URL of this binary inside Artifactory. Okay, the jar was deployed successfully to my repository. The next phase is the build information. Okay, and this is a very important feature, because what happens if you want to have the build environment information deployed into Artifactory? This step is responsible to collect all environment variables that are relevant for this build and publish that information into Artifactory. So right here, you can see that I am able to browse it. And if I'm copying this and I'm going here, what I will see is that under the build tab that we saw earlier, and sorry, I need to connect again. Now let's go back to this URL. So under here, I can see that I have a new build named Calculate CI Job. Okay, this is found under here, under this build tab. And I can see that these two modules were deployed just right now. Okay, but not only these modules from this specific build, but also the environment variables. Okay, so if I'm scrolling here, I can see the Android SDK root, Chrome web driver version, some GitHub Actions parameters, and I can actually do a diff between different builds. Okay, so if this build was failing for some reason, and I want to compare it to a former build, I can check a former build right here, and basically compare. Just a second, and basically compare the dependencies. In this case, all the dependencies were unchanged. It means that I'm building the project with the same third-party dependencies, and maybe the environment variables were changed. Okay, but in this scenario, I can see that nothing was changed. Okay. Okay, so these ones were updated, which makes sense because this is the GitHub run ID and this is the GitHub run number. Okay, great. So a few more things. So this step is regarding the published build information. I'm bringing the environment variables into Artifactory, and here I have a quality gate named X-ray scan, which is responsible to scan the binaries for vulnerabilities. It can be other quality gates as well, but only if this step is successful. What I do is called build promotion. Okay, I'm deciding to promote this binary. Okay, it is ready to go to my release repository, and with one JFrog CLI command, which is JFrog Artifactory build promotion, I can choose to promote this to this repository. And when I say promotion, it means that this binary, and when it says it's promoted successfully, that this binary will be available here. Okay, so if this is my production repository, I know that all binaries under this repository pass the my quality gate, which is in this case the X-ray scan. Okay, great. So this was my example. I want to go over to the new security permissions part. So yeah, so Artifactory is an enterprise-ready solution, and we have to provide good security models so that eventually, when you have multiple development teams working with this solution, everything will have its own permissions, and they will be able to configure it correctly. So our permission model is consist of users, groups, and then different permissions that are available are reading the binary from Artifactory, annotate it with maybe new information, deploy to Artifactory, delete the binary from Artifactory, or also manage it yourself. Okay. The relevant resources that can be managed in Artifactory are, for example, repositories, like we've seen virtual repositories, local repositories, remote repositories, but also builds, like we've seen the last build that was the Calculate CI job from GitHub Actions, and also other resources which are not going to be covered in this session. So yeah, users and groups can be managed inside Artifactory, but you can definitely bring your own LDAP server and integrate it to Artifactory so that users and groups will be immediately brought into Artifactory. You can bring your SAML SSO provider and authenticate against this provider and not with Artifactory. You can have API keys used to do the REST API calls. And you can also choose to have temporary access tokens instead of API keys. The difference between API keys and access token is that API key is related to a user, and access token is a more generic way of communicating with Artifactory. You can choose to refresh it, you can choose to delete it, and etc. And of course, the passwords can be encrypted and are saved in a secure way in the database. So let's go over into Artifactory, and basically under the administration panel, under the identity and access, you can see users, groups, and permissions. So under the users, we've seen how to create a user and delete a user with the REST API, but you can also create groups and have groups for different teams, for the development team, maybe the QA team, maybe the management team. And basically, you can attach permissions to each group, okay? And this is a great way of implementing your role-based access control model, because eventually when you create a new permission and you name it maybe the QA team, all you need to do is add the relevant resources for the QA team in terms of which repositories are relevant, which build integrations are relevant, and later on choose the groups that are basically the QA team is composed from. So in this scenario, when I'm choosing the resources that are relevant for my QA team, and I'm choosing the group as a QA team, that's it. Once the people are leaving the QA team or joining to the QA team, I need to manage this as a group, and the permission stays the same. So the permissions can be read, annotate, manage, and we've seen that for every resource that is possible to manage in Artifactory. Of course, in terms of security, you can bring your LDAP server, like I mentioned, and this can be configured under LDAP here. And in this example, you can see that the LDAP server is with this URL, and you can match your user pattern and all the relevant configurations for the LDAP, as well as some LSSO. If you have another provider, you need to bring all the relevant configuration, the login URL, the logout URL, etc. Okay, great. Yeah, so yeah, I covered these ones, and we're back to the JFrog platform. So we discussed mainly about Artifactory, but the JFrog as a whole provides an end-to-end DevOps solution, okay? So the solution is enabling binary management with Artifactory, DevSecOps with X-Ray, distribution capabilities, CI/CD, and basically Artifactory is the mission critical heart of this solution, okay? When you deploy and push your relevant changes to the version control, you can build a project and deploy the binaries into Artifactory. Artifactory will store the binaries and manage them for you. X-Ray is providing security and compliance and is sitting next to the Artifactory server. It means that you can have artifact security and container security and know about the relevant vulnerabilities inside Artifactory, and also reveal the relevant licenses that are available inside your software. What happens if you deploy the binaries and you want to take them closer to your production environment? For that, we have distribution, which allows you to package your relevant binaries, relevant ready to production binaries closer to your production servers, and with that, prevent network latency and network bandwidth. This can be done using JFrog Edge nodes, which are Artifactory read-only servers that can be sit closer to the the place that you want to distribute your binaries to. Pipelines is JFrog CI/CD solution, and you can write and orchestrate all your CI and CD processes inside the JFrog platform. So which pipelines you can integrate very quickly to Artifactory and also deploy to the relevant production environment and basically orchestrate that. It's a YAML-based solution, and you can basically use it on the cloud and on-prem. Mission Control is the last product where you basically can monitor and have an overview of the whole solution. So you will know what happens if one server is down or one server is not reachable anymore, and you want to be able to monitor and configure the whole solution. That's why we have our dashboard for that, and this is Mission Control in this solution. So the topics we cover today is basically the concept of having a binary management and why it is important and what Artifactory has to offer in this field. We saw a CI integration with GitHub Actions with the JFrog CLI. We covered the metadata, and we saw how exactly the metadata is viewed in Artifactory. And we experienced the REST API, the CLI, as an automation tools. We understand how to use Artifactory in basically a secured way and define and manage the relevant permissions for the relevant teams. We cover the whole JFrog platform and all the JFrog products in general, and that's it. So yeah, so this is the exciting part actually, where you need to QR scan this, and you can get a free T-shirt from us. So I want to mention, I think the advantage of using the free tier instance in this session is that it's available for you also after this session, and you can basically play around with Artifactory and with the relevant information that we'll send you afterwards and experience it. So it can stay much longer. And yeah, thanks for listening, and I had a lot of fun. I'm very glad that we had so many participants. Catherine, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I would also like to thank you. We apologize if for some people it was a bit fast, but our slogan is release fast or die. So I guess that's our thing. Thank you so much, Tal, for the training. I hope that everybody enjoyed it. We will share the recording, so don't worry, you can go through the training again. Also, the Artifactory instance that you signed up for is unlimited in time. So you can use it, and of course, not only for training users, but you can actually use it in your development environment and enjoy it. And yeah, please go to the link and fill out the form with your t-shirt size and your address, and we will send you a t-shirt. If you have any questions, please reach out to us. If you are interested in our products for commercial use, please connect with us as well. There's a contact form on our webpage. What we are doing is we are setting up sessions with our technical expert. We are looking into your needs and into pain points that you maybe have, and we can help you to make your developer life much easier and your DevOps engineer life, of course. So Karen, do you want to say a few closing words? Is there anything that we can provide or that you need at this point from us? So somebody is asking again about the free lab. So the Artifactory instance you signed up for is a real free tier version of Artifactory and pipelines and X-Ray. So this is not just for training purposes, but for your real life. Yes, and we also have the JFrog Academy, where you can look for free of charge trainings. So just go to our jfrog.com website and look for the Academy in the menu, and you can also enjoy training there. We are also running many webinars a month. So this is also something where you can learn a lot of good things. Some of the webinars are very tech hands-on, and some of them are more about DevOps processes. So please make sure that you, if you are interested in more info, that you check out our webinars as well. And of course, we have a huge knowledge base on our JFrog page that you can consult, a lot of set me up features and good stuff that will help you. Okay, Karen, I need to unmute you just a sec. Sorry. Can you unmute yourself now? Try it, please. Ah, I think it works now. Yes. Yeah, that would be fantastic. If somebody is interested in further sessions after Tal has recovered from this one, I'm sure that we can involve him for further trainings or somebody else from the team. Oren and Patel, anything from your side?
Just to thank you all for your valuable questions and the engagement.
So I think Patel is in a call now parallel to this session. So
or she's still answering the questions.
Okay. All right. So yeah, again, a big thank you to you all. Please fill out the form and claim your T-shirt. You earned it. And I hope to see you again in another training session or in one of our webinars. So I'm leaving the Zoom open for some more questions, but I think we also then have to, if there's anything more, we probably have to take it offline. I'm stopping the recording though. So I'm seeing a couple of questions about certification and more training. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a link here in the chat about the JFrog certification and also for the JFrog Academy, where you can find more training. So somebody's asking if you can leave. Of course, if you don't have any questions, you are free to leave. So there's no discount coupon for the certification. No, the training is for free. No, you will not get an email confirmation after filling the form. We will send you the T-shirt directly if we don't have any more questions. So the certification exam fee is $200. I see a question about that as well. The training is for free, but the exam is $200. I'm seeing a lot of interest for the shirts. Yeah, we have really cool shirts. We are inventing many JFrog characters. So this time we have turned Iron Man into a frog. And we have that's something that we love to do. So if you want to start a collection, there are a lot of JFrog shirts around. Yeah, Batman we have, of course, Batfrog. That was one of our first ones. So the certifications are DevOps related, yes. No, when you fill the form twice, you will not receive 2 t-shirts. Okay, I think we are going to slowly close the Zoom. And if there are other questions, then please reach out to us. But can I close the Zoom? Okay, so thank you, everyone. Have a great remaining day or evening, wherever you are. And I hope to see you soon again. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.